Greetings, my friends, and welcome. It's great to have you here. A jam-packed 3 hours straight ahead from the Rush Limbaugh program as I sit firmly ensconced in the distinguished and prestigious Attila the Hun chair here at the Limbaugh Institute. Telephone number, if you want to be on the program, 800-282-2882. The email address, lrushmo@eibnet.us. So yesterday, when I spent a lot of time on CNN, and the fact that they will not retract the story that their only source is now admitting he lied about. CNN will not retract it. Remember what I said, ladies and gentlemen, as the reason why this was happening. I said they are protecting the reputation and the legacy of Carl Bernstein. Woodward and Bernstein. You know, Woodward and Bernstein did their Watergate stuff back in the 70s. And Woodward and Bernstein, well, Bernstein primarily has been all over the place, doing his brand of journalism ever since, and has not really stepped in it, but now 74 years old, and this is a doozy. This is an embarrassment, and CNN, I have no doubt, now everybody is speculating that this is the reason CNN is hanging tough and refusing to retract, is because that they feel the need, and probably Bernstein's working on them too, to protect his legacy. He's one of the three bylines on the story. The other one's Jim Sciutto, and I forget who else. What we're going to do in mere moments, we're going to go back and we're going to relive the day CNN announced this story. That was back on July 27th, and it was Allison Camerata in the InfoBabe anchorette chair, and they thought they had the scoop of the season. They thought they finally had it, that Trump had lied and that he had colluded with Russia because they had a source telling them it was Cohen and Lanny Davis, that Cohen had seen it, that Cohen had seen Trump. Cohen knew that Trump had done it. And this lie lasted for a month. It was finally exposed when Lanny Davis realized that Cohen testified before Congress saying something entirely different. When Cohen testified before Congress, he said he knew nothing about Trump having prior knowledge of the Trump Tower meeting. And that's under oath. So Lanny's sitting there saying, wait a minute, my client has told me that he saw Trump. And then Lanny, after Cohen told him that, sourced CNN. Lanny went to see, and why would CNN, have you ever thought of this, why would CNN use Lanny Davis as an anonymous source? I mean, everybody knows Lanny Davis, and at the time he's Cohen's lawyer, and he comes right off of the Clinton War Room reservation from the 70s. So why would Lanny Davis be an anonymous source? Why would CNN not name him? Does Lanny Davis not have credibility, or did CNN not want to identify that one of their sources was a warrior defending his client? Anyway, they didn't identify the source. Lanny Davis then finally, after a month of fundraising, after a month of a GoFundMe campaign, or a significant amount of time where Cohen had generated enough money to pay Lanny enough money for his tireless work, Lanny then starts calling everybody and saying, you know what, I made a mistake. My client didn't know. My client doesn't know. My client cannot say for sure. He wasn't there. My client totally made it up. And thus, I made him. Well, CNN will not retract any of this. And I speculated yesterday, just to be repetitive here, to make the point home, because I think there's any doubt about it, that at the top of the list of reasons why, I mean, it's not the only reason, but one of the primary reasons CNN's hanging tough is what's going to happen to him. Nothing's going to happen to him. How can they lose any more respect than they've already lost? How can their audience get any smaller significantly? What really is anybody going to do to him? Nobody's going to do anything to him. If anything, other media might get mad at them for misleading the rest of the media, because, you know, the Washington Post had to withdraw. They had to change their story. New York Times, but CNN's still hanging. What's going to happen to them? Nothing happens to any of these people on the side of this that are trying to nail Trump with bogus, trumped up, never happened evidence. If you're CNN, say, what's going to happen? They're not going to lose any respect. Nobody's going to give them any grief over it. May as well hang in. Continue to try to mislead as many viewers as possible and protect the image and the legacy of Carl Bernstein. So we'll circle back to this in a minute. Next thing, what blue wave, ladies and gentlemen? In Florida, in the governor's primaries yesterday, we had an interesting battle shaping up. Ron DeSantis, who, full disclosure, I know, and I have played a couple of rounds of golf with. I call him governor on the golf course. He says, he doesn't say, don't say that, don't you? I just, he'll make a good shot. Way to go, governor. He's a nice guy. I like him a lot. I've met his wife. But as you know, I don't endorse during primaries, and I didn't. But Trump did. Trump did an appearance for DeSantis, and Trump heartily endorsed DeSantis. DeSantis was double digits down when Trump starts working for him, and DeSantis wins by double digits. Now, who in the Republican Party can do that? Now, we're told that, Trump's, he's not what he was. People have lost their luster for Trump. All this rigmarole from the left. That people are fed up with Trump. That people wish they could get their vote back. That Trump embarrasses them. You know the drill. Except when you look at polling data, 90% of Republicans maintain that they are in total sync with Trump and completely approve of the job he's doing. 90%. What other Republican could take a fellow Republican double digits down and convert that into a double-digit victory? Could Mitch McConnell do it? Could Paul Ryan do it? Who could do this? But the interesting thing, in addition to that, is the turnout. 1,602,000 votes on the Republican side. 148,000, or 1,480,000 on the Democrats. I'm trying to do the math in my head here. That's a significant turnout advantage for the Republicans in a state the Democrats claim that they're going to win, because the people of Florida are also fed up with Trump. But this blue wave was supposed to be massively overwhelming the Republicans in turnout, and it didn't happen. Republican turnout, as I say, 1.6 million. Will round the Democrats up to 1.5. So basically, 116,000 votes more on the Republican side than the Democrat side. And in Arizona, another Republican blowout. It's 124,000 in Florida. The Republicans outturned the Democrats by 100,000 in the Arizona governor's race. But yet, we've been hearing about blue wave, blue wave, blue wave ever since last December when the first generic ballot polling data was released. We've continued to hear about blue wave. And of course we would, because the media is not at all objective and simply is now carrying the agenda of the Democrat Party. I think actually leading it, but that's neither here nor there. So in two states where the Democrats planned on making big bank, where the Democrats plan on turning things around, there was greater Republican turnout than there was Democrat turnout. Now, this is not enough to suggest that there's going to be a red wave. I fall back to my standard operating procedure on this, and that is nobody knows what's going to happen. But I can tell you one thing that the media is saying that isn't true. The media is relying on age-old formulas which say that the first off-year election after a new president is elected, the president's party traditionally loses 15 seats. And they say the reason for this is that voters in the president's party lose enthusiasm. They secured the victory for the president in the presidential race. And so the next midterms, 2 years after the presidential election, they're not nearly as fired up. They become complacent. And they don't realize the dangers that lie ahead. I'm sorry. You got to throw that formula out with Trump. You have to throw out much of the conventional wisdom and formulaic thinking that has existed inside the Washington establishment for years. The Trump voter is not complacent. Trump voters are not sitting at home, fat, dumb, and happy, thinking that the contests are over, that their work is done. They are far more sophisticated than that. Not only that, the drive-by media each and every day keeps the Republican base fired up, motivated, inspired, and even angry, far more than they know. You know, the subject of media bias is often discussed. And you've heard the leftists and the media say, well, we're not biased. You know, it's in a psychological sense, people who are biased may actually not know it. And I find that people on the left, particularly the higher up you go in the food chain in the left, the more ignorant they are about people not like them. They don't socialize with. They make no effort to understand. They never come in contact with people who are not like them. So what do they think of people not like them? That's where the bias is. They think that they're whatever they think they are. And then they attach their formulas to it. And so the media and the Democrat Party firmly believes that Trump's voters are a bunch of idiots because conservative voters are idiots. Trump voters are even bigger idiots because who could not be an idiot to vote for Trump? They've never taken the time to learn who Trump voters are. They've never spent any time with them. They're not curious. They don't care. And that's the bias. They attach all these old formulas. And they continue to apply conventional inside the Beltway wisdom to an outsider candidate and campaign, the likes of which they still don't understand and still resent. So I'm here to tell you that the primary foundational belief of their formula that the blue wave is going to happen, the fact that they are more motivated and more inspired, Democrat voters, and that Republican voters, Trump voters, don't realize the importance of the election or they're not inspired because they already won 2 years ago. Not true. I think the drive-by media itself keeps Republicans / conservatives / Trump voters fired up 24/7. I think, in fact, that many Republicans / Trump / conservative voters can't wait to vote just to stick it to the media. Even if some of them may have lost a little of their fervor for Trump, they still resent the hell out of the way the media is participating in this silent coup to destroy the guy they elected and to overturn an election that they won. I don't think motivated Republicans are going to be a problem. I don't think lack of motivation or lack of inspiration. And at the same time, I'm not sure I buy into this notion that the left is so chomping at the bit. It's a bunch of secretariats out there in the starting gate. They just can't wait. The turnout in special elections, the Democrats were not appreciably higher. In some of these primary elections that we've had, we don't see any evidence of blowouts on the basis of turnout. And we certainly didn't see it yesterday. But see, the difference is they are close-minded about it. And you can't talk them out of their belief that the midterms are essentially already over and that the Democrats are going to take the House and they can't wait to start these investigations to paralyze Trump and maybe finally get rid of him. You can't convince them that they're stereotypical, statistically formulaic, old-fashioned views. You can't convince them that they may not be able to rely on them. So they continue to report the news. They continue to do what they do with the belief that, like them, everybody now has become totally disgusted with Trump. And they're missing. And it's right in front of their face. Even after these elections yesterday, say in Florida and Arizona, even with the turnout differential, they're still going to be in denial about it. I've seen it on CNN. They come up with all kinds of cockamamie excuses to explain it. And the number one excuse is, well, come on, this is a special election turnout. Yeah, it's going to be much different in November. You wait. We can't judge it. You know, every election that's coming up, they predict that they're going to win it going away. Turnout, votes, you name it, it's going to be a slam dunk. When they lose it, or when the turnout's not what they think it is, they fall back to, well, it doesn't matter. This is not the kind of turnout where we're expecting this blue wave. That'll happen in November. You can't judge anything by these primaries or special elections. You can't. See, every time they lose an election, that election doesn't count. That turnout model doesn't matter. It can't be right. They continue to live in denial about why they're losing. So we shall see. I still believe that we haven't yet had the events that are going to shape the outcome in the election in the midterms in November. I believe it's still dicey to start polling people here in late August and to try to attach any solid meaning to that. Although I will say, well, I think that the media's behavior, the behavior of the Democrat Party, the whole Washington establishment, I think one thing you can count on is that Republican/Trump voters are fed up now, and they're going to stay fed up through November. It doesn't matter, because the media is going to keep lighting a fire under them every day, multiple times a day. Let me take a quick timeout, only because I have to. Back.
You're listening to Rush.
You think McCain could have taken a gubernatorial candidate down double digits in pre-election polling and turned him into a double-digit winner? I'm just asking. And here's another question. Has anybody seen Barack Hussein or Hillary Clinton on TV denying the news story that the Chinese government had real-time hacked access to Hillary Clinton's computer, her homebrew server and network when she was Secretary of State? Have you? I haven't seen that. Has anybody seen Obama and Hillary indignant? Anybody seen them on television flat out refusing, denying, saying this is absurd? Anybody seen that? You haven't. Why not? You realize what a hellacious charge this is? Well, everybody's thinking the Russians have. By the way, I think that all these people at the FBI, the McCabe's, the Strzok Smirks, the Pages, the Bruce Orrs, Comey, I think they all knew at the Chi-Coms what it is. Folks, it's real-time access to her computer. Not to mention the spy that was on Dianne Feinstein's staff for 20 years. The Chi-Coms essentially had a screen-sharing app, real-time. They simply could watch Hillary Clinton do whatever she did on her computer. And if she got an email from Obama, they could read it as she opened it. Real-time screen sharing is essentially what the nature of the hack was. And they're not denying it. I would think that if this wasn't true, why, we would have had flat-out denials. Instead, they're hoping the media not reporting it means nobody will see it. About the Florida governor's race, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump versus Andrew Gillum. That's Bernie Sanders and George Soros. And that's how people are looking at this. And yeah, that's going to become conventional wisdom. It's Trump versus Soros. It's Trump versus crazy Bernie. What it's going to be is the American founding versus Venezuela. The American founding versus socialism. That's what it's going to be. I understand the desire people have to personalize this, attach celebrities or personalities to the vote and so forth. But the substance of the governor election in Florida is real simple. It's conservative / the founding of America type government type of country versus this new brand of Democrat socialism, which is being advocated by the likes of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And we will see as time unfolds. Let's now go to the audio sound bites. This is the CNN Lanny Davis story, and let me just review for you essentially what happened here. Back on July 27th, CNN breathlessly ran breaking news claiming they had an anonymous source. We now know that source was Lanny Davis. They had an anonymous source saying that it was now fact that Michael Cohen knew in advance, that Donald Trump knew in advance of the Trump Tower meeting involving Russians visiting and talking with his son. And CNN ran this story breathlessly as though they had finally discovered the Holy Grail. They had found the collusion that the media and journalists had been searching for over 2 years. They did not identify their source as Lanny Davis, which I still say remains very curious. Why would Lanny Davis be their anonymous source? I mean, they got a source. Everybody knows who Lanny Davis is. Lanny Davis is a dyed-in-the-wool, loyal Democrat advocate. He was and is the warrior for Cohen. And CNN lived off of this story for a month. And they kept hammering it and hammering it. And one of the bylines on the story for their website was Carl Bernstein of Woodward Bernstein. And nobody corrected the story, even though Lanny Davis knew this was not true. And he knew it wasn't true because Michael Cohen had lied. Michael Cohen testified to a congressional committee or two that he had no knowledge of Trump and the Trump Tower meeting. He didn't have any idea if Trump knew or didn't know. He had no idea if Trump went. He didn't know a thing. And that was his testimony. But he had told Lanny Davis something else, supposedly, which Lanny then told CNN, which CNN then ran their breaking news story and couldn't stop having orgasms live on cable television. And then Lanny figured out somehow, some weeks later, that Cohen had lied to him, which meant that Lanny had lied to CNN and the Washington Post, because when CNN ran the story, the Washington Post and CNN all independently confirmed it, they said. See, that's what journalism is all about. An outfit will run a story. The New York Times, Washington Post have not heard about it, so they get in gear and they try to confirm it with their own sources. And then they reported that they were able to confirm with their own source. Lanny Davis was the source for everybody. And then Lanny had to come clean at some point, which he did recently, by saying that he'd made a mistake. And there are actually two elements to this that Lanny had lied to CNN about. The Washington Post and New York Times have run their so-called corrections. The Washington Post has run a story really ripping Lanny Davis and Cohen for doing great damage to the case against Trump. Because now there isn't a case against Trump. Everything about the story was made up. CNN will not pull it. CNN will not correct it. CNN will not withdraw it. CNN will not change a thing. And that is because I'm convinced, as I said yesterday, they're dying to protect the reputational legacy of Carl Bernstein and Jim Sciutto. There are three other people on this. So let's go back to July 27, 2018. CNN's New Day co-hosts Allison Camerata and John Berman are breathlessly introducing the breaking news.
CNN breaking news.
We do begin with breaking news. For those of you who have not paid much attention to the Russia investigation, today would be a good day to start doing so.
Indeed.
Sources tell CNN that President Trump's longtime former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, has begun spilling the beans. One of the bombshells he reportedly wants the public to know is that then candidate Donald Trump knew in advance and approved of that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting in which Russians promised dirt on Hillary Clinton. And these sources say Cohen is prepared to make that claim to special counsel Robert Mueller.
Now, if this is true, it means the president lied about it publicly. It means that Donald Trump Jr. lied about it under oath. And it means the current president of the United States had knowledge of and approved of accepting Russian help during the campaign.
You can, folks that can barely keep their pants on. I mean, you can just hear it in their voices. The only problem is that none of that was true. Let me unpack it just a little. I'm not going to go through it line by line. Sources tell CNN that Trump's longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen's begun spilling the beans. One of the bombshells he reportedly wants the public to know is that Trump knew in advance and approved of the June 2018 Trump Tower meeting in which Russians promised dirt on Hillary. If Trump had known, there's no crime. There is no, this would be what people would call collusion, and it isn't a crime. Trump, this is all moot because none of this happened, but I'm just telling you in addition how weak the CNN case is here. The Russians also did not promise dirt on Hillary. Well, there were a couple of people that set the meeting up that said they had some dirt, but what this meeting was really about was a bunch of Russian adoption activists trying to get something called the Maginski Act changed. In other words, Trump Jr. was set up. The whole meeting was a setup. They had no Hillary dirt. There wasn't any Hillary dirt. And when Jared Kushner and Trump Jr. found out about it, the meeting ended. There wasn't any Hillary dirt. All there was an effort to lobby people who were not even in power to change the Maginski Act. I believe that this whole meeting was part of the setup run by the FBI and the deep state and all these other people. I think just as they did not warn Trump when they supposedly found spies in his campaign. Well, we know they planted the spies, Stephen Halper and a couple others. This, I think, was a setup. They wanted this to happen so that they could then leak that it had happened to the media. Now, Allison Camerata says here, Michael Cohen has begun spilling the beans. He wants the public to know. Well, then why isn't he the source? Why is there not what Michael Cohen wants? And then the second, Cohen couldn't wait to tell Mueller. Cohen, said the story, wants to talk to Mueller. Cohen can't wait to tell Mueller this. Well, that wasn't true either. In other words, folks, not a word of this, not a single word of this breaking news story is or was true. In the next bite, they bring in Jim Sciutto, whose name was also on the story as a byline, and he, too, has now spread elements of this story on his own outside of this report that we have the soundbite for. He did so multiple times later, and everything that CNN said about this has been debunked. But here is the next bite with Sciutto.
Let's go first to CNN's Jim Sciutto, part of the team that broke this exclusive story. Jim is live in Washington. Jim, lay it out for us.
Good morning, John. Sources tell myself and Carl Bernstein that President Trump's longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, is willing to tell the special counsel Robert Mueller that then candidate Trump knew in advance about his campaign's June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians who were promising dirt on Hillary Clinton, and that the president approved of that meeting.
Do not doubt me. None of that's true. It did not happen. And the Washington Post and New York Times have now written stories saying so. They have retracted it. Well, I don't think there's been official retractions. They've run corrections. They've done their mea culpas. And now they're dumping all over Cohen. And remember, Lanny Davis let this live. Lanny Davis let this live for 3 weeks until he decided to tell media that he'd made a mistake and that Cohen had not said that, and Cohen had not seen this, and that Trump didn't know the meeting, that Lanny can't prove anything. I can't tell you the president knew of the meeting. I can't tell you that he approved the meeting because my source, I got it wrong. I made a mistake. Well, what happened was Cohen, when he testified before a congressional committee, did not say what CNN reports him saying when he's under oath. So he either lied to Lanny Davis or they both concocted some scheme story to end up raising money for Cohen. Remember, Lanny Davis goes out there and begs people to send money to Cohen's GoFundMe page so that Cohen can continue to tell the truth. As I keep asking, what does it cost anybody to tell truth? I guarantee you, if Michael Cohen wants to go on TV today, there'll be 15,000 cameras waiting for it. It won't cost him a dime. But Lanny Davis needs to get paid. He's a lawyer. He's working for which is another. What is a Clinton lawyer doing defending this guy? I mean, none of this passes the muster test. One more bite. Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald co-founded a website called The Intercept. He lives in Rio because he's become persona non grata in the American left, but he is an official card-carrying leftist progressive. He championed Edward Snowden. Snowden granted him all kinds of access after Snowden got caught or discovered to be leaking all kinds of NSA secrets. Greenwald used to have a regular guest appearance window on MSNBC, but they have banned him now because he publicly writes and states that he doesn't think there's anything at all to this Russian story. He doesn't think that there's any Russian collusion with Trump. He thinks it's all been a big waste of time, and so he's persona non grata. Here is Greenwald last night with Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Tucker asked him, what do you make of this? What do you make of CNN not retracting it, not correcting it?
I've been on your show to talk about a lot of these humiliating moments, and this might be one of the worst ones yet. After Lanny Davis went on CNN with Anderson Cooper, and to Anderson Cooper's shock, admitted that everything CNN had been breathlessly hyping is true, was actually false. The Washington Post and the New York Post listened to that, and they said, wait a minute, we independently confirmed CNN stories based on an anonymous source, and our anonymous source was Lanny Davis, who's now saying the whole thing is false. So they did what they had to do and what they should have done, which is they retracted the story. They outed their own source. CNN couldn't do that because they lied to the entire world. They can't retract the story, and they can't admit they lied, so they're just continuing to stick to what everybody knows is a lie.
And there is no other source but Lanny Davis. When the Washington Post, New York Post wanted to confirm it, they went to Lanny Davis. That was CNN's source. Lanny has told them he made it up. CNN is not withdrawing, not retracting the story. It is a humongous embarrassment. They can't withdraw it. And it's because, I'm telling you, folks, it's Bernstein. It's Bernstein. Protected. We have a guest coming up at the top of the next hour. Ann Coulter, her new book, Resistance is Futile. We'll be here for a while to discuss that and whatever else is happening out there and has crossed her mind, which, of course, is limitless. In the meantime, we're going to get started on the phones. And by the way, I'm serious. A real media would be camped outside Hillary's house and Obama's house and demanding to know what the hell was going on with the Chinese government having real-time hacked her computer, her homebrew server, while she was Secretary of State. A real media would be, and the fact that nobody is reacting to it and they're not out there denying this, they're not even breaking a sweat over it. But they will. In the meantime, Wausau, Wisconsin. Brian, you're first today. Great to have you with us, sir. Hi.
Good morning, sir, and thank you for 30 years of a free education. You couldn't possibly be more right if you were God himself. Us Trump supporters can't wait to get to the polls.
Yeah, I think this is going to shock. We shouldn't talk about this too loudly.
Oh, shh, quiet.
Well, because I've got evidence. I mean, I got sound bites. The drive-bys are to listening to this, but you realize I'm still being blamed for the fact that there's no Walter Cronkite in America today. It happened at another symposium recently. I get blamed because there's no media monopoly. So they occasionally listen, but I think, you're right. You're chomping at the bit. Do you know anybody that voted for Trump who is lackadaisical and hum-ho and is fed up, not thinking of voting in November?
No, sir, I do not. Everybody is aware, awake, and ready.
Why?
Why? Because we want to prove the media wrong. We want to support the president who's doing what he actually said during the campaign he would do. Now, he's not conventional, but he's getting the job done.
Speaking of getting the job done, there's a new Harris poll out there today. I first saw it referenced by Kellyanne Conway. And it is a survey of many things, including blue-collar work. Oh, folks, we have a new GDP number today, too. The economy grew 4.2% in the last month. Remember all of the experts claiming that 4.1% was just a one-off? It was an outlier. It didn't mean anything. Well, 4.1 has become 4.2. That looks like sustainable. But the Harris poll, 55 blue-collar workers thriving in the Trump economy. 55% say they are better off than 5 years ago. 85%, my life is heading in the right direction. 88% of parents, blue-collar parents, my kids are going to have a better future. These people know full well that this stuff stops the minute the Democrats get back in power. They are not going to stay home. Blue-collar, the little guy, Trump, apparently owns them. A brief time out here at the top of the busy broadcast hour. And when we get back, Ann Coulter and her new book, Resistance is Futile. Well, hang on. Much remains to be done, and we'll get to all of it today. And it's been a while, but we're happy to welcome back to the EIB Network the one and only Ann Coulter, who has a new book out. And it's a classic, as all of hers are. This was entitled Resistance is Futile. How are you doing, Ann? Great to have you back here with us.
So happy to be here, and thank you for the excellent title, but mine is a different kind of resistance.
Well, now, I was going to ask you about it. You know, Ann, I have to be honest. Sometimes, you run hot and cold on the people that you fervently endorse. Romney was a disappointment, for example. And I don't know, I haven't yet been able to determine where you're coming down with President Trump as we sit here today, but we'll find out.
Yes.
In due course. But resistance is futile. Now, you can take that any number of ways. Are you talking about the left-wing resistance? Resistance to Trump is futile? Or what resistance here?
Not the resistance to you, Rush, who are irresistible.
That's right. There isn't any.
There isn't any, exactly. No, this is the resistance that, shockingly, Hillary Clinton claimed to join a few months after the election. You know, in America, we refer to political opponents who lose as the loyal opposition. If Trump had lost the election and a few months afterwards announced that he was part of the resistance, people would say that's a military term. That's the French Revolution, the resistance to the Nazis. He's dog whistling to the militias. It's a message to the KKK. And imagine that then being accompanied by right-wing violence against Hillary supporters, as we have seen, enormous violence by Antifa and left-wing lunatics against Trump supporters. I think people would recognize we're in the middle of a fascist uprising and that it was absolutely irresponsible for a losing presidential candidate to announce that to be part of the resistance. It's actually pretty shocking that she did that.
Well, I remember, during the, I guess it was the last debate, and Chris Wallace, I think, asked Trump, because it had been, they've been buzzing about this. Mr. Trump, can you tell us, if you lose the election, will you concede? And Trump said, no, I'm not going to tell you that tonight. I'm not going to let you run a headline that I'm announcing I'm losing the election tonight.
Right.
I remember the reaction they had at conniption, and Trump is a threat to democracy. Trump's going to throw 200-plus years overboard. Now look.
Yes, and at the time I was a little testy with Chris Wallace for not asking the same question of Hillary. Boy, was I right. I guess he should have, since they aren't accepting the results of the election.
Okay, first chapter, the resistance. Trump is Hitler times infinity. So you're characterizing the left-wing resistance here and how they're reaching just the extreme degrees that you make it. How do they have any credibility, even with some of their Wacky support. None of it makes sense. None of what they're doing or saying makes any sense to anybody.
No, I know. The leftists have a mollusk's grasp of history, so they know Hitler bad, fascism bad. So what do we call Trump if we want to call him the worst thing we can think of? He's Hitler. He's like Hitler. And it's not just, the crazy social justice warriors and the Antifa and university professors out yelling this stuff. This has appeared in the pages of the New York Times in columns by David Brooks and a book by Madeleine Albright warning Republicans that this cult of personality. So then he gets an authoritarian personality. Then he gets into office, and it turns out he has the exact opposite of an authoritarian personality. He has a suck-up personality. I don't remember Joseph Stalin going around saying, oh, these people are incredible. They're fantastic people. Kim Jong-un, he just loves his people. I love these kids. He is, as many have said, Trump is like a couch cushion. He bears the impression of the last person who talks to him. He's doing many great things, but to describe him as having an authoritarian personality, or take the example of his not following an unconstitutional executive order of Obama's on DACA and his, as I refer to it, the Muslim ban. The three branches of government are, to use one of my favorite words, co-equal, because it means the same as equal. So the president has all of the powers of the executive branch in his hands. Some potty little district court judge in Hawaii is going to tell him no. I would love for some president someday to say, thanks for your opinion, Judge, but I took an oath to uphold the Constitution too. I have the authority as president given to me by the Constitution and by the law to exclude any immigrants in the interest of national security, which he has full authority to do, but he doesn't. No, Trump says, fine, we will appeal this. We will wait. We'll work its way through the court. So, it really is just them knowing that Hitler is supposed to be bad. They may as well call Trump a poopy head.
Well, I remember when this program started some 30 years ago, it was so uncool to refer to any political opponent as Hitler back then. It was lazy, so it was said to be intellectually lazy.
Yeah.
It's damaging. Nobody could be anywhere close to Hitler, much less worse. And now look, it's part of their retinue. It's part of their daily lexicon. Look at the. Look. You've been chronicling this for the left and their craziness for the longest time, and now the resistance. But is any of it working? Does any of it concern you?
Not really. The violence concerns me as anyone who's any Trump supporter has to worry about getting beaten up by going to a Trump rally or being thrown out of a restaurant. That's I admit a little irksome. But I think the resistance would be much better off if they'd read my book. I give them some tips on how they ought to be attacking Trump, which is to attack him on the worst thing he's actually done. And stop running off on wild, demented conspiracy theories that no one believes and screaming that he's Hitler.
Well, give me an example of something he's done that you think they could legitimately score some points with. They've tried accusing him of separating families at the border.
Right.
I've even had people on our side say, Rush, that's really bad. Those pictures are bad. Trump's got to do that. I said, he didn't do it.
Right.
He didn't do it. People respond to the media. It's amazing, even on our side, how sometimes it is easy for the media to start creating doubt. What? You're not going to be giving an interview, right?
If I were advising the Democrats, and don't worry, they're not going to listen to the excellent advice I am imparting to them. Look, Sherrod Brown is an old-style Democrat, senator from Ohio. He used to 100% agree with Trump on the trade deals. Jesse Jackson, Barbara Jordan, Harry Reid, Barbara Boxer, and Di-Fi used to all agree with Trump on the immigration issue. This is a new thing. The entire Democratic Party's philosophy and the left-wing philosophy is, where's Trump on that? Oh, that's awful. I think we could get the left to start defending pederasty if we told them that Trump was against it. But if they went back to their old-style Democratic politics, what you would attack Trump for is not really hopping to on all of those promises, like the wall. But they can't do it. They can't. Look at Molly Tibbetts last week. That if the Democratic Party were sane, that should be Trump's Kate Steinle. He's president. He's got a Republican House. He's got a Republican Senate. But don't worry, Democrats have blown it. They won't take advantage of it.
You think that? Do you believe, since you bring this up, you think there's going to be a blue wave? You think a Democrat's going to take the House?
Well, there will be, historically, the odds are overwhelming that there should be a blue wave. I think the resistance keeps bringing Trump's voters back. And if he really pushes on the popular issues he won the election on, immigration, trade, no more pointless wars, and gives a lot of rallies, I've been recommending that his staff just block off September and October and do nothing but Trump rallies. I keep seeing on MSNBC, I'm a hate watcher because I'm unusual that way. They keep claiming, oh, yeah, I don't think a Trump rally is going to help in my district. Oh, it's just going to turn off the suburban soccer moms. No. Do not take advice from MSNBC. Trump coming to town totally energizes the base. They spread out. It goes out in concentric circles. It's like listening to you, Rush. It spreads beyond the actual person listening to you. They tell their coworkers and their neighbors. So I think he can limit it. And luckily, we have a lot of seats to give up in the House. And it's very unlikely that the Democrats will take the Senate. We don't really have that many seats up.
Well, I think you're right about the rallies. Did I read the other day where they're blocking out as many as 4 days a week in September and October? Not every week, but some weeks. He's going to go out that many times.
He should definitely do that. That's brilliant. Because if we do lose the House, that is absolutely the end of hope.
How do you convey that message? You know, I was telling people today and yesterday, these the GDP numbers out today, 4.2%. Blue-collar workers survey, they're overwhelmingly in love with Trump. They have a renewed faith and so forth. The tax cuts, this economy is genuinely booming in ways that it hasn't in enough time, that some people have never lived through an economy booming like this. They've only lived through an America in decline. They've been told to get used to an America decline, that jobs are not coming back. Somehow Trump and his team have got to get the message out that if the Democrats win, this all ends.
Yeah.
Because the Democrats equal Venezuela. Maybe you don't want to say that. That's maybe too extreme. But the Democrats are going to bring all this to a screeching halt on purpose.
Oh, yes, that's absolutely right. One of the wonderful things about Trump, I mean, he does get the message out, and as I say in the last chapter, we may not get the wall out of him, but I do think the way he raises issues on Twitter, I completely disagree with the cliche you hear all the time on TV. Oh, he tweets too much. No, I love his tweeting. I want him to be the official communicator for the Republican Party.
Wait a minute. Now, my memory could be failing me, but I thought, speaking of the wall, I thought there was a period of time, and maybe 2 months ago, that you had really gotten down on Trump and were openly saying so. It seemed like you'd lost some faith, and it was about the wall, it was about immigration, but you don't sound like that today.
Well, I've been giving him tough love on the wall since the day after the election. No, I assume you and everyone remembers election night. I remember it very distinctly. And I thought, after Adios America and In Trump We Trust, it's finally happened. We have a shot to save America. My work is done. I'm just going to kick back. I'll hang out with Rush Limbaugh in Palm Beach. I'll have cocktails and enjoy myself. No, it turns out this presidency is more of a transactional presidency. He does have to be swatted on the nose with a rolled-up newspaper when he goes astray. But remember, he used to do that all the time during the campaign. Remember during that debate when he was worse on H-1B visas than Marco Rubio, and all of Twitter explodes? He has to come out with a clarification and retraction a few hours after the debate. So we do have to keep our eyes on him, but it would have been the end of hope if Hillary had been elected.
Oh, my God. Look, there's nobody that outworks him. There's nobody who can keep up with him energy-wise, and he has stayed true to every promise that he's made, at least in terms of effort and in terms of accomplishing them more than any president in recent memory, and he's undeterred. I have to take a break, but I want you to speak to his psychology. You know him pretty well. I don't know of any other elected official in this country, Republican especially, who could withstand an average week that Donald Trump gets and still remain focused and positive and upbeat and basically, we know it bothers him. You know him, and we know it bothers him, but it doesn't deter him. And he's it. And I think this is what his voters get. Without him, what they want dies. And they're going to support, they're not going to let any Access Hollywood video take him out. They're not going to let any of these usual ways the media destroys Republicans. They're not going to let them succeed. They're going to defend him to no end. But anyway, let me take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue with Ann Coulter and her new book, Resistance is Futile. After this, with Ann Coulter, brand new, hot off the press, Resistance is Futile, New York Times and every other list bestseller. Look, we already discussed your opinion of Trump and your assessment where he is, and in the limited time we've got here, you claim, and everybody's trying to find out, what is the actual genesis, the beginning of this Russian collusion story? When did it actually, what triggered it? The House committees have been investigating it. They think the FBI is shielding documents on when this really began. You've searched the record, and what do you think about it? Where did it begin? When did it begin? Who's behind it?
Well, you already know that it was Hillary Clinton. You've cited Shattered, the book, where they talk about coming up with it after the election. What I think is fun about my book, there are a few three important historical notes. For one thing, Democrats, as you know, always claim we was robbed when they lose an election, unless it's a landslide like Reagan in 1984. But Reagan in 1980, there was a huge conspiracy about how Reagan had sent Bush and other emissaries to Iran and asked them to hold the hostages until after the election. That actually appeared on 2/3 of the New York Times op-ed page, that insane, bonkers conspiracy theory. They always say it took the deft touch of the Clintons to have one of these conspiracy theories go on and on and on and consume the entire country. The other interesting thing, because I don't have a job and can spend all day reading Nexus, is when it was first launched, the Russia conspiracy theory, it was by Robbie Mook, Hillary's campaign manager, on the eve of the Democratic National Convention. Why? Because the WikiLeaks documents had just gone up. And this is what Hillary always does. When she's caught in the middle of a scandal, she finds some apocryphal enemy to blame. She blamed some man in Arkansas for hating her husband after losing to him, Sheffield Nelson for Jennifer Flowers. There was the vast right-wing conspiracy for Monica. She blamed the sexism of the media for her loss to Obama in 2008. So there are always mysterious dark forces conspiring against her when she's caught in a scandal. Third, and I think an hilarious part of the book that can really only be shown in a book, it's sort of a visual thing, is that at the time, the entire mainstream media responded to Robbie Mook's interview with George Stephanopoulos on the eve of the Democratic National Convention, claiming that experts were telling him, that Russia had hacked the DNC and passed it to WikiLeaks in an effort to help Trump. Okay, the New York Times, the LA Times, even the New York Daily News laughed at this. They basically all saw it as the craziest John Bircher conspiracy that even the John Birchers wouldn't have come up with. And as the New York Times and the LA Times and the rest of them said, you're launching this theory on the basis of unnamed experts. Basically, the media did not take it seriously. Even when Hillary brought it up in the debates, the New York Times sort of protected her by mentioning it on page A14. It was not until disaster struck and Hillary lost the election that the media goes looking through the record and what explains this? What could it be? It can't be that Trump was running on popular ideas or there was anything wrong with our love Hillary Clinton. That's when they started pushing it as the exact same reporters, the exact same newspapers suddenly started pushing it as a serious theory. All right, now, just a couple minutes here. I want to know what you think of the special counsel investigation, where it's going, how long it's going to go on, and what the ultimate resolution to it's going to be. Well, it's utterly outrageous. We only have a special counsel because of the false insinuations of James Comey that President Trump was under investigation. Of course Trump was frustrated. He's trying to run the country here, and the head of the FBI, I have the quotes from the hearings, it's just outrageous the way Comey was implying Trump was under investigation. Bam, we get the special counsel. And 2 months later, Comey admits, yeah, he was never under investigation. Not only that, but when we found out the FBI was spying on the Trump campaign, remember their response was, we weren't spying, we were trying to protect Trump.
Exactly. Okay, 1 minute. Where's it going? How's it end?
Perhaps, I think it's probably useful to. I mean, Trump has full authority to fire Mueller, to throw off the investigation. I think he can probably use it. It's so crazy that it's so far off. I think it's helping Trump.
Yeah, it's you don't sound worried about any of these things, these irons in the fire that the Democrats have to literally destroy him. I mean, they're not going to stop. They're going to give everything they've got, but it's encouraging because you go up and down, optimism, pessimism. It's encouraging to hear that you don't seem to be that worried about all this in the long term. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. Everything the left hates about Trump is what I love about him. I loved his response to Charlottesville. I love him this week attacking the social media, the big tech firms for censorship. I love him going after the media and calling them fake news. It's exactly what I think the base loves about him. We finally have a Republican who fights back.
Excellent. Perfect timing. EIB Network and El Rushmore meeting and surpassing all audience expectations every day. Thank you to Ann Coulter. New book, Resistance is Futile. It came out August the 20th. It's been just a little bit over a week. And Ann Coulter, it needs to be said, remains the fearless warrior that she's always been. She will go anywhere and debate any of them anytime without any fear whatsoever. That hasn't changed. She has always been courageous, and part of her modus operandi has been to descend into the belly of the leftist beast, primarily on college campuses, but anywhere else too. And she continues to fight the good cause. So thank her again for time here. We are not quite finished with the CNN Carl Bernstein story. We move on to other things, get back to your phone calls. Now, where we left off here, we had played the audio sound bites of CNN having their orgasm back on July 27th with breaking news, proof that Trump had colluded, an anonymous source claiming that Trump knew of the Russian meeting in Trump Tower and approved of it. The source for that was Lanny Davis. CNN runs the story. The Washington Post and the New York Post say, wait a minute, what is this? They independently try to confirm it. They call Lanny Davis. Lanny Davis confirms it for them. CNN does not identify Lanny Davis as their source. So Lanny Davis is the only source, anonymous, for this story that Cohen has the goods on Trump and can't wait to tell Mueller about it. Then a month goes by, 3 weeks to a month, and Lanny learns that his client is telling a different story under oath before congressional committees. But enough time passes that the fundraising campaign for Cohen, GoFundMe, can get sufficient money in their $400,000, much of which will go to Lanny, we presume. So Lanny then comes clean and tells the Washington Post and the New York Post that he made a mistake, that none of what he told them was actually true. Well, since he's the source for CNN, he told them the same thing, but CNN has not retracted. The New York Post, the Washington Post have. CNN continues to live by the story, claiming they have other sources, but they won't identify. Nobody knows who it is. But none of the other news outlets can find another source to confirm what Lanny said. We now know it's not true because Lanny admitted that he made it up. And Lanny has admitted that Cohen made it up. So CNN continues to hang on a lie. They continue to stand behind a lie. Have a story, the style section of the Washington Post, the headline, a journalist of Watergate fame faces questions about a blockbuster Trump piece. Well, that would be Bernstein, who used to work at the Washington Post. What kind of headline is this? A journalist of Watergate fame faces questions about a blockbuster Trump piece. It's Bob. It's Bernstein, of Woodward and Bernstein fame, and they go on to identify him in the story. John Nolte at Breitbart. CNN's Jeff Zucker claims another soul, Carl Bernstein's. Imagine for just a moment you are Carl Bernstein. Here you sit, 74-year-old living legend, co-credited with uncovering the story of Nixon's corrupt White House. You've made it this far. You've made it another 45 years without sullying your image, without pulling a Dan Rather, and then you're caught lying, flat out, straight up lying about the Trump Tower meeting. And it's worse than that. Bernstein, on numerous occasions, claimed that this entire Russian collusion story was worse than Watergate. Back on August 22nd, 1 week ago today, Carl Bernstein, talking to CNN's John Berman about how the Manafort and Cohen cases will impact the Trump presidency, saying that it is worse than Watergate, a line that he repeated on August 3rd, July 26, January 29. He's been living off that for all of this time. We're going to go back to the audio sound bites, number 24. This is the same day, well, 2 days later, July 29th, 2 days after CNN's scoop. He appeared on Reliable Sources on Sunday with little Brian Stelter as the host. And Brian said, your byline graced all the graced. Oh, yes. Carl Bernstein's byline graced. It didn't appear. No. When Carl Bernstein's name appears above a story, the space is graced. Yes, your byline graced all the stories about Watergate 45 years ago. Your byline is back on the scoop about Cohen and Trump, who claims that Trump knew in advance about that pivotal Trump Tower meeting. How did you do it, Mr. Bernstein? Little Brian setting up. How'd you do it, Carl? How did you do it again? Oh, my God, Carl, you took down Nixon, and here you're back 45 years later. Oh, my God, you're on the verge of taking down Trump. How did you do it, Carl?
I talked to sources, as did Jim Sciutto, and it became very apparent that the former attorney to the President of the United States was going around and telling people that the famous Trump Tower meeting, which indeed was convened for the purpose of collusion. Cohen was saying that Donald Trump, the candidate for President of the United States at the time, had authorized the go-ahead for that meeting to take place with his son. And I said, this is news, as did CNN. So like in Watergate, you have a very serious news organization, CNN, in Watergate, the Washington Post, making judgments about what is news.
And I said, this is news. And so did CNN. I said, this is news. And today, everybody that told Carl Bernstein what he breathlessly reported has retracted it. Lanny Davis has retracted it, said that Cohen doesn't have any idea whether Trump knew in advance of the meeting. And they're out there reporting Trump lied, but nobody has any evidence. Lanny has withdrawn his. Cohen has withdrawn his evidence. Cohen has said he no longer wants to talk to Mueller. He doesn't have anything to tell Mueller. But Carl Bernstein is still out there. His head's in the guillotine. His head is in the figurative guillotine here, folks. And the only reason CNN is not retracting the story is, can you imagine? Can you imagine if CNN actually had to retract this story that's got Carl Bernstein's byline gracing it? You imagine what that would do to the legacy and to the reputation of the Watergate journalist who brought down Richard Nixon. This is why they're hanging on. Okay, mentioned earlier that I, your host, am again being blamed for destroying the old media monopoly. Now, by the way, they're right about this. I don't take this criticism as unjust or unfair. They're absolutely right about it. And, you know, when they begin talking about it, they do. When you get them speaking honestly, they do say this. This is why I and this program have always been a target. In 1988, when this program started, there were the three networks and CNN, the newspapers, and that was it. This program was the first national conservative media program. Outside of some magazines, William F. Buckley's firing line on PBS, this program was it. Literally, CNN had not been on the air that long. It was the three networks, and they owned it. They had a monopoly on what was reported, what wasn't reported, what the commentary on what was reported was. So now we head to, let's see here, yesterday afternoon, headline news across America. Carol Costello is talking to Douglas Brinkley. He's back. Rice University history professor and official scholar of the presidency. They're discussing John McCain and the lack of bipartisanship in our nation's capital.
Americans are much more alike than they are different. And when we talk about the extremes, I don't think that's the majority of Americans. I still believe most Americans are moderate, and they don't have like a defined set of ideology each. Like, we're human beings.
We think a lot about
it. Right. So why doesn't that play out in our politics?
Because we now have a media that people choose. One could listen to Rush Limbaugh or Fox News. One can go MSNBC or a more liberal NPR programming. There isn't a Walter Cronkite figure that everybody's tuning in on to get the same news in the evenings, and so it creates some disharmony.
Isn't it fascinating that that's their fix? You know, Obama dreamed about this too. He commented on this a number of times. We used to have common values. Everybody watched the same news every night. Everybody got the same facts and the same news. And it's the same. We don't have that anymore. Oh, they would love to go back to those days. Here's John Meekum. He's the former editor at Newsweek and wherever they'll take him in the liberal media. This was this morning in Washington. The White House Historical Association held a forum on the president's and the press during a discussion of the evolution of opinion-driven media. Presidential historian John Meekum said,
1921, radio comes along, television in the late 40s. There's something called the Fairness Doctrine.
Here we go.
We all own the public airways. So the idea was you could not express an opinion unless you gave equal time to both sides.
Not
so
true.
Most people decided to stay out of that business altogether.
It's not true.
And as part of a generalized deregulation move, President Reagan repealed that in the 80s. That's 86, 87. Rush Limbaugh goes national in 1988. By 1992, he's so important that his support of Pat Buchanan helps bring George H.W. Bush down in the 92 New Hampshire primary. 96, you have Fox, MSNBC. CNN was founded in 80, of course, but it began its move. And so you had this period where we did have more or less the kind of, and part of it also is that that's the media world in which most of us grew up.
Right.
We're accustomed to this idea of Cronkite and the New York Times, and there was a conversation.
Right, we need desperately to get back to these people mischaracterize the Fairness Doctrine every time they talk about it. The Fairness Doctrine is not equal time. Equal time is a separate doctrine. It's a separate theory or a separate regulation. And it applies in campaigns. But the Fairness Doctrine, let me briefly tell you what it is. When it was in play, it did. I worked in KFBK in Sacramento doing this show under the Fairness Doctrine. It didn't stop me. It didn't stop the management of KFBK. We had people that discussed carrot cake recipes at the holidays. We had people discussing local sewage problems. We covered debate. I happen to be the only one talking about politics, but there was no limit, and we lived under the Fairness Doctrine. The way it worked was, if I said something on the air that somebody in the community disagreed with, we invited them in and would put them on the program. They didn't get equal time. They got to appear. If I wanted to have them on for 10 minutes or 15, that's what we did. But even that was not a requirement. The Fairness Doctrine was simply something that said there has to be an attempt at balance. But how you define balance is up to you. But Fairness Doctrine balance has never said that if you do 3 hours of conservatism, you got to follow it with 3 hours of liberalism. It's never been that. So if you, as a radio station, you do 3 hours of conservatism Maybe Sunday morning you do 3 hours of liberal. Bam, you're balanced. If you do 10 hours a week of something, as long as you do an appreciable amount of time during the week doing something else, you're balanced. It's not equal time, and it doesn't grant opponents automatic access. These people don't even know what the fairness doctrine is. All they think they know, is that when it was repealed was when I finally had a chance to blossom. What they don't know is I worked in Sacramento doing this exact show, for all intents and purposes, for 3 years under the fairness doctrine. It was not a limitation in any way, shape, manner, or form. Anyway, I got to take a break. We'll be back. We'll continue after this. Thank you, all of you on hold, for your patience. Time now to get back to the phones. This is Paul in Albany. Welcome, sir. Great to have you here.
Hey, Russ. Thanks for 30 years. It's been great.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. You were talking in the first hour about the media and how they are really kind of peeing off the base here and encouraging them to vote. And I think you are hitting the nail on the head. And if they really wanted to lull us into a false sense of security and keep us at home, which we have proven in the past that we know how to do, they would tell the truth about Trump and his successes. But I don't think they could ever bring themselves to do that. With 70 days to go to this midterm election, they're not going to change their tactics now. So, for them, but I think we are energized.
It actually, it's an excellent point. It's interesting to me, the study the psychology of this. Because here you have the entirety of the drive-by or mainstream media. And what I've always said, if you miss NBC, no biggie, turn on CBS. And if you miss that, you still got time, turn on CBS. If you miss that, turn on CNN. And if you miss that, read the New York Times. If you miss that, read the Washington Post. And just go on down the list. It's all the same. No matter who's writing, no matter who's opining, it's all the same. And they are unified on opinion, and their reporting on Donald Trump is likewise unified. And it is filled with predictable elements: hate, rage, anger, extremism, lies, distortions. And it's interesting to me that they live in such a bubble that they do not apparently have the slightest bit of concern that all of that extremism and lying and unfairness and unbalance and all of the viciousness to Trump is not going to have any impact on his voters. Common sense should tell them that they are keeping Trump's voters revved up, that they are keeping them engaged, but they don't think that. They think that they are depressing you. They think that they are dispiriting you. They think that their constant haranguing, their never-ending distortions, their outright hatred for Trump will prove to you that you can't beat them, that you can't overpower them. No matter what good news is out there, they can ruin it for you. They hope to depress you and keep you from the polls. They haven't the slightest idea how what they're doing is actually affecting people, even though they have the evidence of 2016, but they don't even consult. Email question. Mr. Limbaugh, do you think there really is that many transgender people out there as the media seems to indicate? No. Tell you why we get back.